Hello, this is Thomas Bartke. Well, I wanted to try and see if it might be helpful to record little summary videos about the music appreciation classes at the St. Paul Institute. So this here is lesson number 2, in which we talk about pattern recognition, music and pattern recognition. Now, pattern recognition is a very global phenomenon. You know, our human brains are literally pattern recognition supercomputers. Everything and anything we experience through any of our senses is parsed for patterns that we can use to help us make decisions. Basic decisions such as, are we predator, are we prey in any specific situation, up to very complex decisions in medical research or throughout daily life. Everything that we encounter, our brain parses it into patterns that help us make decisions and base our life on. Let's just jump back real quick before we dive into this in more detail. And let me just tell you, in this big music mind map here, chart map, we're kind of diving into the red, the form, musical form portion here of the map, and to some extent also into parameters and notation into this segment over here. So the red and the orange portions of this big mind map, that's where we kind of are with this music appreciation to the second lesson here about pattern recognition. So let's talk a little bit about what pattern recognition is, and let's just go to a simple example first. Pattern recognition that we are very familiar with because they're simple and they're clear and not much guesswork is number series that we know from basic math. So for example here, example A, 1, 3, 5, that would be the data that we're getting. So now we have to recognize the pattern there, find the rule, and then we can continue the pattern with the next numbers, 7, 9, 11, and so on in this case. So that's the basic rule of pattern recognition. By the way, I do recommend that you Google pattern recognition and you go to the Wikipedia article about pattern recognition, particularly the high school levels, grade levels, and up, to really get some in-depth information on how pattern recognition works. And the basic, very simple components are, in pattern recognition, we need training data. So training data is the series here, the numbers that we have. And then we recognize the pattern by finding the function that leads from one element of the training data to the next, and then from that element to the next. And if we have enough training data available to get a unique and clear function that we can deduct from training data, then we can just continue that pattern and create new elements of the data according to the pattern that's in here. So in this case here, the training data is advanced by 2, starting with 1. So 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2 is 5, and so on. In B, the training data is the series of square numbers of the natural numbers. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared equals 4, 3 squared equals 9. So the next element in the pattern would be 16, then 25, 36, 49, and so forth. This next pattern here, the next set of training data, is a little bit more weird and maybe irregular looking. But take a quick look at it. It goes, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. The next one is 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, and so on. Okay, that would be the pattern here. And this is actually a pattern that can be very easily translated into music. And once you sing this pattern, you can actually more easily continue the pattern, recognize the pattern, and continue the series. Okay, so let me demonstrate. 1, 2, 3. We'll go like this. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Continue. 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6. Right? So you get a pattern that's based on a scale. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6. All right? That would be translating this simple mathematical pattern here into a musical pattern. And you can see if we have a certain amount of experience looking at music and listening to music, then we can actually more easily recognize the pattern in musical terms than in mathematical terms. So, and that's a big key here. The training data, how we can relate to the training data. It has to do with the familiarity, with how familiar we are with the type of training data, with the type of patterns that we're looking at. And then, of course, it has also to do with the complexity, with the degree of complexity that's in the training data. So let's go to a different example. There's some other examples that we want to use here. One is about poetry and one is about design or art. So let's go to poetry first. This here is a sonnet number 18 by Shakespeare. If you read this out loud, you will quickly recognize that there are two parameters that are patterned, or that are a pattern in the sonnet. You know, the one parameter is the rhyme at the end of every other line. So day rhymes with May, and temperate rhymes with short a date. And so on. Okay, so that is one element. That's one key function that we can recognize as a pattern here is the rhyme of every other line up to where here at the very end that pattern is broken, and then it ends here with that couplet. So the other element that leads to pattern recognition in this sonnet is what's called the meter. The meter is the sequence of stressed syllables and non-stressed syllables, and how that is combined into a regular rhythmic pattern. Okay, that's called the meter. The meter in poetry, there's also a meter in music as a musical parameter. So in this case, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and so forth. So you can read it out loud. You see that there is a pattern in the meter from one line to another. They're all evenly metered so that there's a pattern in the meter. And then there's the meter, the pattern in the rhyme of every other line. Day, May, temperate, shorter date, and so forth. Okay, next example of pattern recognition is this very pretty painting of, or it's actually not a painting, what is it? It's a woodcut by M.C. Escher. It's called Day and Night, and it's a little bit more complex. And you can see here, such as just as in the Shakespeare example, there are certain elements to the pattern that are easy and regular, such as the meter and the rhyme, but then there are also potentially vast amounts of data that is really not patterned. It's just kind of comes along with the pattern. The pattern helps structure the massive amount of data, but there's a large amount of data in there that is held together by the pattern that is by in itself not very regular. It's creative, and it fills the pattern with life, so that it's more than just a line of numbers that is nothing but the line of numbers. But these types of patterns, like in the sonnet and in this picture here, they are more irregular. There are certain elements that are patterned. For example, in this case, we found out that these two halves of the picture are mirror images that are negative to each other. So here, over here, what's in this daytime version of the scene, the river is white, turns into this nighttime version of the scene where the river is black. And then every single element that's over here and kind of looks like a nighttime scene reappears over here where it looks like a daytime scene. So it's a mirror image that's negative, a negative of the other side. And it's also a mirror, right? So the directions here are opposite of the directions here. But now in the middle here is where the interesting stuff, the interesting creative stuff happens, where all of a sudden you don't have a hard line where, you know, the mirror would just switch over from one from the day version to the night version, but it actually transitions into each other, where, you know, these shapes that are here between the blackbirds, which are flying to the left, these shapes morph into white birds that fly into this direction, into the night side of the image, of the picture. And you can kind of tell that the spaces, the somewhat irregular spaces between the white birds over here, also then morph into the actual blackbirds on this side. But here in the middle, there's this transitional area of the picture that is not very, you know, it's creative and it's not very regularly patterned. Okay, now let's go one step further and let's take a quick look at this very simple musical example of a pattern. We looked at this and we found that there are patterns in all dimensions, in all kinds of dimensions. It's obviously a very simple example, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's very easy, but that's why, you know, how it helps to see the patterns here. It's simple, you don't have, it's familiar, so we're very familiar with this set of data, so it's easier for us to recognize these patterns here in the music. So in this case, we saw that there's pattern by every note is repeated. So the pitch, once you hit the pitch once, you have to hit it again. Twinkle, two times this lower pitch here, C in this case. Then it goes up, and you hit the next pitch, and this is repeated as well. So every single time, if all the pitches that are in quarter notes are repeated, and then the meter rests in the half notes that are held longer than the quarter notes, and they are not repeated because they're just the same pitch, but they're longer. So repeat, 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 rest, or stop, or halt right here on this note. And it goes over again, repeat, 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 halt. So this pattern by itself is then also a pattern, right? These 6 notes here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes, actually 7 notes, are a rhythmic pattern that reoccurs throughout the whole tune. So twinkle, twinkle, little star comes back as how I wonder what you are. Now we get into larger dimensions. If you look at this first row here, this first line here, it's actually exactly the same as we discovered as the last line. Exactly the same music, exactly the same notes, all right? And the middle line is different. So that's why we call this an ABA pattern or an ABA scheme, okay? And there are all kinds of other patterns actually in here. Okay, so this is a quick summary of this pattern recognition 101 type lesson. I added a bonus video that I thought of finding, and that is 12 variations by Mozart on À vous dirai-je un moment, which is a French version of this very song, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's a French folk song, you know, French version of this American folk song, so it's obviously international folk song. There are a couple of things that are slightly different about the initial simple pattern, and then Mozart comes in and he creates variations, which means there are different musical takes on this song, on these 12 measures of the song. So I would encourage you to listen to this bonus video and listen to each variation and try and figure out and look at the music. The music actually goes along with the video. Look at the music and listen to the music and recognize the patterns that are used in each variation. Each variation, the patterns are completely different from the next one or from the previous one. Okay, very well. So this turned into about a 15-minute video. That's great. So I'll post that, and hopefully that helps everybody remember and kind of catch up with what we talked about in the lesson, and will hopefully help kind of glue everything together as we go through. I can't quite promise that I'm going to do this every time, but this is a start. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.